Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
The stakes are higher. I'm about to leave this safe island we just spent 12 days on preparing all the nice food and the shower and the nice bed, and I'm about to get stuck into this race that could last anything between 35 to 60 days. You just don't know, and it's the unknown.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
The sun is setting as the sky turns pink. The mountains are calling, and all I can think of is you, my friend, my partner in crime. What you doing today? What you doing tonight? I will run with you till the river runs dry.
As listeners of the Dark Zone know, we are strong supporters of Ascend Athletics and their goal of empowering women and girls through leadership mountaineering in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Ascend Athletics is truly redefining opportunity for women around the world. Be sure to check out ascendathletics.org to learn more about their mission. Once again, ascendathletics.org, and you can find that link in the show notes. Keep in mind, as I always point out, they pay nothing for this promo. Instead, we love the work that they do, and we're happy to spread it to the world. The Dark Zone is happy to support and partner with AR School. What is AR School? Well, it's an online service that ensures that you have access to the expertise that you need so you as an adventure racer can continue to level up. We all know that progress can be slow, so why waste time repeating mistakes or wondering if you're using the right tactics? AR School brings together world-class training, top competitors, and athletes of all levels. It's like a transition area between races where you can learn what works, share your expertise, and fuel your passion alongside other racers. AR School is launching soon, so join me and several top competitors inside AR School by joining the waitlist at www.thearschool.com. That's thearschool.com. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Dark Zone, episode 105. Hard to believe that when we started this thing a few years ago, we figured we'd put out a few episodes, see what would happen. And here we are over 100 episodes later. October 3rd, 2024, hot off the heels of a great USARA National Championship down in West Virginia, courtesy of Adventure Addicts Racing. This is one of those episodes that it's somewhat adventure race adjacent. Glyn Sadler is a former Marine Commando. He's an ocean rower, and a lot of his adventures cross over to adventure racing. He does a great job telling his tale. You're adventure people, you'll enjoy it. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode, number 105 of the Dark Zone at Adventure Racing Podcast. And always remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Welcome to the Dark Zone at Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. We're joined by Glyn Sadler. As listeners of the Dark Zone know, very often we'll talk to adventure racers. We'll get feedback from them about their experience as adventure racers. And from time to time, we want to bring onto the show people who are adventure race adjacent, who by virtue of their work, their pursuits, their individual enjoyment of life, they have lessons to teach us in adventure racing. And I came across Glyn and his work. Instagram, I believe he had done an interview someplace else. And I saw that he had done so many things: ocean rower, spearfisher, Royal Commando. He has done things in deep water. He's done a lot of adventures outside. And I thought Glyn would be a really, really nice guest to have on the show to what he could teach us about his experience outside of adventure racing and how we can apply that into adventure racing. So Glyn, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here. Introduce yourself to our guests.
Yeah, so I'm 43 years old. I'm a father of two children. 2018, I decided to take on a challenge and row 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. Prior to that, I was a Royal Marine Commando for 9 years. I did a few tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. So adventure and sort of elite level endurance has been, at the forefront of my life since the age of 17, which is when I joined as a young boy. And now getting into the world of free diving, spearfishing, but in general, just adventure. And the dark zone came off my radar last year, and I've been getting sort of a bit more knowledge about the adventure racing side of things, and I have to say I'm extremely intrigued.
I always joke that when I interview guests who are not adventure racers, it's actually a secret recruitment strategy. But I get you on to talk about it. Next thing you find yourself on the start line of a race, wondering how you got there. In discussing your work, and so many things jump out at you, but let's go back to the beginning. When you were 17 years old and you joined the military and you got involved there, what were the early lessons that they taught you about personal preparation, about teamwork, of being part of a unit? What did you learn early on?
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. For some reason, I didn't do particularly well at school. I was always into the Cub Scouts, the Air Cadets, things like that, and I loved orienteering and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, I decided to join the Royal Marines, which is part of the Navy, and it's one of the longest infantry training in the world, 30 plus weeks long. And the main lessons they teach you in that, they call it the commando spirit. And it's sort of, there's like 4 pillars to it: courage, determination, unselfishness, and cheerfulness in the face of adversity. And so it's hard to get your head around that sort of stuff at the age of 17. But as you go through training and realize that you've got people around you that are trying to strive for the same things, those 4 things soon click in place, and they all have to be there, especially, I think, which will transfer well to adventure racing, is the unselfishness side of things. And we certainly had that on board our ocean rowing boat, in terms of, if we say that, okay, you've got 3 people thinking about you as an individual, and you're doing the same for everybody else, then we're all thinking about each other and striving to achieve a goal for each other. And then the cheerfulness in the face of adversity is a great one as well. There's always going to be tough times, and certainly as a young boy training, there were plenty of tough times for me. And it's hard to get your head around the cheerfulness side of things, but I guess it's the equivalent to like laughing at the rain. You're going to get absolutely soaking wet. You're going to be miserable, but being miserable isn't going to help. So if you can sort of see the lighter side of it, then it'll help push you on. Yeah.
And recognizing too that event in your life, the rain coming down and being cold, because you voluntarily joined that organization and that unit, you've made a deal with yourself that there's going to be times that are going to be tough. And as a result, it took away your ability to be grumpy about it, because like it rains and you chose to be out there. And as a result, that's the way it was. Yeah.
I think if you can sort of think about it as, I won't say you take glee about seeing how other people react to it, but when you see it starts raining, or you get told that the helicopter's not coming to get you actually, or whatever, and you see other people, and if you just think of the lighter side of it, it can get you through, and it puts you into that adversity together, and you get through it.
So those 4 pillars that you outlined: courage, determination, unselfishness, and cheerfulness. Clearly, there's an ethic and there's a code that they inculcated, they taught you about when you went through your training. They wanted you to learn that.
Yeah,
that's explicit training. How much do you think that was already existing in successful graduates of the course versus it had to be honed inside them? Did anybody show up there who really had a hard time getting it at first that got on board, or was it hard baked into who they were as people?
No, I think to be honest, the Marines in general, especially the training teams, they know exactly what they're doing, and they know how to physically and mentally break you down. They don't want you to be an individual, they want you to be part of a team, and so they know how to strip you to your bare bones a little bit, and then they will they'll give you the opportunity to get out of that and to use what they've taught you and show that it works, and they're very good at that. And I think it takes a while to get your head around the fact that it's a bit like a game. At the end of the day, if the training teams are there to test you, and they'll test you whenever they want to test you and however they want to test you, it's nothing personal. You get woken up in the middle of the night, to move, or to go and get put into a cold pool and get soaking wet, and and have to change into your dry clothes and back into your wet clothes. It's sort of, they have to do that. Once you get your head around the fact that they're doing this to see how I react, not to break me completely, then it starts to all come together. Once you get your head around that, some people just can't do that, and the failure rate is fairly high, and with the length of training that there is, the injury rate is quite high as well. So sometimes the main adversity people have to get over is the fact that they're injured and they have to go and rejoin another troop that's further behind them and stuff like that. So, but once you get through to the other end and you pass the commando phase, you earn your green beret. We have a saying that it has to be earned, not given. And once you get that green beret, that's it. You're an elite commando for life, sort of thing.
So we always find in the crossover to adventure racing is that the unit is only as good as the individual members, right? And if some person's having a hard time, you have to kind of work. You have to carry them along. How early in your training did they begin to drive home the point that we were a unit, or did they want you to be an individual first and then they brought you together as a unit?
So I think maybe the first sort of 2 or 3 weeks, they are looking at who's got what already, putting you through it. And then it becomes quite apparent that you are a unit. And even if everything you do is immaculate and you've got a kit inspection and everything's all in the right place, somebody else has not done it right. The saying there would be one in, all in. So that would quite quickly start to change your mindset in terms of thinking, okay, I'm good, but what's so and so doing? Has he got his stuff the right way around, or stuff that they're picking up on? And then you start to gel as a unit then, and then they'll come off you a little bit, as you get through training with that side of things. Every now and again, they'll throw something in just to remind you that standards are required. But so there's quite a lot of mind games going on, but they're all beneficial, if you look at it that way.
Right. And obviously what they're trying to do is they want to drive home the point that as a lone wolf, you could be very, very strong by yourself. Yeah. But in situations where you're being tested, especially combat, it's the ability to work alongside the person to your right and to your left and trust that they too could work with you, and therefore you could move together. So they work really hard on that. Clearly at 17 years old, big lessons to learn. Clearly you went to several tours, Afghanistan, Iraq. Like, how did you, and looking back upon that experience of your training compared to its application, how well did they do getting you ready for that? Were you as ready as you could be, or what did you learn after the training when you put it into actual practice? What did you learn there?
I think what was very strange. So my last tour in Afghanistan particularly was quite a tough tour. A lot of frontline duty, a lot of time at the front line. And if anything, I think I felt so well prepared. And the fact that I felt extremely adaptable. We have a saying that no plan makes it past first contact with the enemy, if you like. And so you just sort of live your life on the front line, just ready for anything. And the training, the old sort of train hard, fight easy saying became quite true as well. And actually, you'll find that most of the time you're not doing very much when you're on the front line. But when something does happen, you're ready to go, and it just takes over. I mean, I've no shame in saying that my first experience of combat, waiting in the back of a vehicle to get out and join the fight, my whole body was shaking. Like a. But as soon as that door opened, the sergeant major shout, "Out you get!" That was it. Everything was fine. I was everything felt level. The adrenaline came down, and I just remembered I was there to do a job. I was there to look after the people around me, and I knew that they would do the same for me. So, yeah.
And those are incredibly formative experiences to have as a teenager, 17, 18 years old. You do your tour. What age did you leave military service?
So I was a bit older by that time. I was in my mid-20s. So I think I left when I was 28.
Okay.
So
it's about 15 years ago now.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, holy cow, right? You say that.
Yeah,
decade and a half is like, wow, time flies.
Yeah, well, I've got a 16-year-old daughter now, and a 13-year-old son. It's a different lifetime ago. Yeah, and they evolve over time. You change and you go through that experience, and all of a sudden you realize that your kids they're close to the age that you were in when you went to military service. Yeah, now you said it, I'm sort of thinking, because when my daughter's going through the last year of school next year, I remember that time. It was a difficult time for me. Didn't do particularly well. Options sort of closed up, but she'll do much better.
Yeah, well, that's what you want for your kids, right?
Exactly.
You want your child. You want better for them than you had for you.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's funny too you bring that up. The idea that there are so many people I speak to, both by virtue of my day job, what I do outside of the dark zone, and what I do here. It's amazing how many people that they never found satisfaction in traditional schooling. Like things didn't happen inside those classrooms that they say to themselves, I'm really good at this. And instead, military life, other activities outside of that normal life. And then what happened was they found that when they came into where they were in a group and they were active, they got a true sense of who they were. And it sounds like that was your experience, that your military service, it offered you the opportunity to be in a place where the things that you were good at doing, you were able to hone those skills.
Yeah, for sure. It's, the old surround yourself with like-minded people.
Right.
I think going back to when I was in 13-year-old boy and I was in the Air Cadets, it wasn't cool to be in the cadets at school at all.
Right.
But when you're there, amongst the people who are on the same wavelength, then you sort of you feel comfortable in your own skin, and then you're able to explore, your own abilities a bit more.
Yeah, there's that idea. There's two things there. One is the idea that we're the average of our 5 closest contacts, right? We look around, look to your right, look to your left. Whoever you spend the most time around, that's who you're going to be like. That's human nature. We're adaptable creatures. That's a huge part that comes across there too. And the idea of flow, that when you find yourself with like-minded people doing something you enjoy, time speeds up and things just get a lot easier. And it feels like you found that in those experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
So 15 years ago, you come out, you do your service, and you come out, you're a veteran, you've served with honor, and you're discharged. It's then time to take this skill set that you have, that you've honed over that time. You're still relatively young, right? You're only in your late 20s. Now all of a sudden the world kind of opens up to you, and where did ocean rowing come into this? Like, was there a gap in between? Did you go into another profession? Like, walk us through how you took that rich skill set and then you applied it to the other parts of your life.
Well, I feel sort of embarrassed now. You say it like that because it was actually wasted. All of those abilities, experiences, they didn't come into. I didn't use them in the way that they should have been used, and I sort of came away from everything. From I started a family at home, which was great, but I was so focused on getting a job in civilian life. What does that mean for me? I used to be this elite member of an elite team. Now I'm struggling to get a job. But I'll be honest, I was trying to get offshore because that's where the money was and the time off, and I was sort of chasing that side of things. I sort of went through that period of time for, gosh, it must be a good 10 years. And it wasn't until maybe I had a severe accident. I snapped my patellar tendon off my shin bone. I was trying to get into sort of fitness again, thinking I was still this 28-year-old warrior. Clearly I wasn't. And so my body let me down a little bit. I think that the mind was still there. But and then my friend opened a CrossFit gym. Who I served with, he'd left and he'd opened this successful gym. And I thought maybe I need to get back there. It'd be like being with the guys again, because there was a few ex-Marines there as well. And so I was getting back into that, surrounding myself with like-minded people. And the ocean rowing side of things just sort of came up. I'd watched, similar to a lot of the guys who've watched the Eco Challenge that's mentioned quite a bit in your podcast, I'd seen a documentary with a British guy called Ben Fogle and James Cracknell, who had rowed across the Atlantic early 2000s, I want to say. And it was sort of like a 3 or 4 part series, and it looked amazing. And that sort of must have planted a seed in my head at the time. And then a guy at the gym said that he was he was looking at doing that. He too had left the military and was sort of looking for that adventure again, basically. And I said, I'd love to do that. And he said, well, there's a space on the team. Do you fancy joining? And so I thought, well, I'll just check with the wife, or the long-haired sergeant major, as I would call her. And I think she she said, yeah, whatever, because I think it sounds just so epic. that to row across an ocean, that I don't think she realised what was involved. And once I'd committed to that, then that was it. And then that became my sort of brotherhood again. That team, the team of 4 guys, we didn't all know each other. I knew Duncan, Duncan knew Will, and Will knew Fraser, and we just all came together. And then that started this 2-year process of trying to get a boat to the start line of the world's toughest row for the Atlantic.
So clearly what had happened was, and it's funny you mentioned the idea of the 10 years, and you said that they were wasted. And let me I'll point out here that in the course of those 10 years, you also became a father and began to raise kids. And so if you think about it,
But I guess, the
physical part of it goes away a little bit.
The skill sets I'd learned from Marines don't really prepare you for fatherhood.
Prepare you for the stuff. And I have to tell you, I've never been in combat, but I have 3 kids. And sometimes combat feels like it's a bit more attractive than having 3 kids.
Yeah, you've probably got it worse.
No, you're right about that. But I love the fact that, and you hear it very often, is that people do things when they're younger, and then that thing ends, whatever it might be, military service, time in school, whatever it is, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, being involved. And then they kind of have this in-between period where they spend other parts of their lives building themselves. And then when they're in a certain age, 30s, whatever, they realize that they're still young enough with some fitness and some goals. And then they go and they find like-minded people. And to your point, you came off the injury, right? The injury happened. And now all of a sudden you bump into these 3 guys, and it reawakens what you went through when you were 17, that there was all those things were in place. But I never rowed across an ocean. I've read about it. I've learned about it. It feels like it's one thing to say it on a podcast after you've done it. Yeah. But how big was the difference between we're going to row across the Atlantic, we're going to do this thing, 2 years doing it, and then the actual thing of doing it, how big was the difference between the way you thought it was going to be and the way that it was?
Pretty vast. There's a big chasm between what you think it's going to be like and that first day leaving the safety of dry land. And to be honest, my own experience is that the shock of capture, that first initial contact, that's the only thing I can compare it with. And that is how nervous I felt at the start line, leaving. Now I've got a wife and 2 children that are relying on me.
Stakes are a lot higher.
The stakes are higher. I'm about to leave this safe island. We just spent 12 days on preparing all the nice food and the shower and the and the nice bed, and I'm about to get stuck into this race that could last anything between 35 to 60 days. You just don't know, and it's the unknown.
For the listener, what was the race logistically? Where did it leave from? When did you leave? Tell us about the numbers around it.
Okay, so at the time, it was referred to as the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. It was run by a company called Atlantic Campaigns. They'd run a series of races prior to that, and it used to happen every other year. It then became more popular. It happens every year now, and you're talking between 20 to 40 teams taking place, and they range from teams all over the world. We had South Africans, Australia, team from America, team from Antigua, and the race itself starts on one of the Canary Islands off the west coast of Africa called La Gomera, and the start line is San Sebastian Harbour, which is the spot where Christopher Columbus left when he set off to west to sort of discover the Americas. And it basically, you just hang a left west, keep going west 3,000 miles, and hopefully at some point you come across Antigua in the Caribbean and to a place called English Harbour, which is a beautiful spot in the world. And so that in a nutshell, that's the sort of format of the race. And you do get 5 person teams, 4, 3, 2s, 1s, and you get mixed male and female. So there's just the island before. I mean, there will be some. I can imagine that this is where the biggest crossover is, that community of racers on the island, and the 12 days before where you're all prepping. You're doing all your checks and your make sure you got the right amount of rations, all the safety briefings, all the medical briefings. And the one thing I'll never forget was the head safety officer, Ian Couch. And he said on the first day to sort of just remember that, you are on this beautiful Canary Island, and you've managed to get your boat to the start line, which is obviously a huge deal anyway. But just remember that you're representing your sponsors, this, that, and the other, and that this is not your last 12 days on Earth. And when he said that, from the moment he said it, it actually did start to feel like this could be our last 12 days on Earth.
Like, don't say it out loud.
Yeah, and people started to. I mean, you'd go to the pub for a bit of a sort of stiff drink at the end of the day, just to take away the stress of everything, and because it was a countdown. 12 days feels like a long time, but they go so quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the start line, and that community was great. They do put on a few sort of evening do's together. Whether it's ended up doing karaoke one night just to sort of break the tension.
They build that, and you're right about the crossover adventure racing, right? Whether it be a 1 day race or a few hour race or everybody from all over the world, they collapse on a single spot. And from that single spot, they're all going to take off together. And so you have this, I use the phrase traveling circus, right? And with tongue in cheek, that all of a sudden everybody's going out into the world and doing this thing, and regardless of the race itself, that's what's happening here.
Yes.
So you had those 12 days. Now, of the team that you trained with, you worked with, had any of them done something this big ever before?
So no, at the time of the team's conception, no, they hadn't. I think we'd all at some stage been part of some sort of, whether it be a marathon or sort of 10K Spartan race or whatever it is, but in general we were all fairly adventurous people anyway. Duncan had been in the army at the time. I think he was due to leave not long after we formed the team, and he got injured on the commando phase actually, and ended up being medically discharged, which was obviously quite tough for him. And I think his salvation through that was that rowing became one of his main forms of exercise, because it was low impact, and then he just became an absolute ninja on the rowing machine. And through that, he was invited to row across the Atlantic with another team, which at the time we were sort of didn't know whether that would be a good idea, because all our focus was on our campaign. Mm-hmm. But actually it turned out to be an excellent decision by Duncan, because he managed to learn a lot of lessons for us as a team before we set off on our crossing. But yeah, up until the point of conception, no. But by the end of it, I think we were all pretty well prepared.
Well, you become experts. What was your personal training like to get ready for it? What did the regime look like?
So it's really difficult. The best training you can do is with an ocean rowing boat. Unfortunately, these ocean rowing boats cost an absolute arm and a leg. You're talking maybe dollars. It'd be like $60,000-$70,000 at least, to get there. So we had to raise the money through corporate sponsorship to get that, and it was the old chicken and egg scenario where it's easier to get sponsorship if you've got a boat, but you can't get a boat until you get the money from sponsorship. But we managed to get that quite quickly, but we didn't get our boat till very late on. I think it was the September before we were due to leave that we managed to get it, and we had to get our mandatory 100 hours training in, of which I think 18 at the time had to be during the night. I think it's 24 now, but
and that's a race organizer expectation. You have to show that so before they let you. So not anybody can just show up and do this. Yeah. They want to have a base level understanding that what you're doing, and basically 25% has to be nighttime rowing. Yeah,
and I think it's as the years have gone, the more sort of stringent it has got as well. The more safety conscious everybody's been, the lessons are being learned, so adaptations are made. And Fraser Molam, who's on our crossing, he's now one of the safety officers for Atlantic campaigns who run the race now. But I don't know whether it's the same for a lot of adventure races, but we were entering a sport that we knew nothing about, the rowing side of things. I'm sure there'll be guys that don't know much about cycling or the kayaking side of things before they start adventure racing. So you try and work a path of where you can get the most training done. And we went to our local rowing club, Teesside Rowing Club, and we did a sort of crash course in learn to row, which was really good, and they were super helpful. And it sort of opened our eyes to another community, if you like, of like-minded.
And they must have loved the idea that all of a sudden these guys show up and they're going to like, of course we'll help you. We can't wait to help you. Like, they're probably invested in your success right away. They want to play a role.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because the introduction to rowing was a very gentle process. And they're used to people from all ages and backgrounds coming in to sort of dip their toe into rowing, which is still seen, I think, as a bit of an elitist sport, because in the UK mainly it's sort of maybe private schools that can afford rowing teams and things like that. And we learned to row with the part that was called Teesside Recs, which I thought meant as in because they were all older, but it's for
dinosaurs.
But it was Teesside recreational rowing, and so they were all super experienced. Greg, the coach there, he knew exactly what we needed. It was sort of a bit of a kick up the backside, and he was very strict with our rowing technique and things like that. We stuck with that, and then for me, in general, over the 2 years, it was just a case of general strength and conditioning,
right.
And then building up to it. It was hours on the rowing machine. I think I maybe did a bit too much of that, especially in the few weeks building up. So just to give you a sort of insight into when the race starts, usually it's in December, because that's when the trade winds and the currents of the Atlantic are going in the right direction. Bear in mind that an ocean rowing boat can only go sort of 3 to 4 knots under its own sort of power of manpower, if you like. So you leave at that time of year, and normally in December I'll do 100 to 200,000 meters on a concept rower, which is sort of like 5k a day up until Christmas.
Right.
It's a challenge. Concept 2 got some really good stuff on the website for training, and so I was doing that, but then I was doing these 2-hour long rows. Just to sort of get into the routine on an ocean rowing boat. The oars never stop moving. That's the whole sort of premise for the team. Is everything is key to keep this boat moving in the right direction, and the oars keep moving. When you do your changeovers, it's one at a time. So there's sort of a pair of oars always moving, and the sort of most efficient time scale for that would be 2 hours on and 2 hours off. 24/7. So you might sort of think, oh well, that means you get like 12 hours rest a day, but there's right. not much resting going on when you are resting, because
so it's an individual rower, and he would row for 2 hours and rotate through.
Yeah. So on our boat, we did as a team of 4. We had 3 rowing positions, but normally you would have 2 people rowing, 2 people resting,
right,
and then you would swap over them alternately.
Got it.
So there's always, so it meant that you would row with 2 people rather than just the same person every time. And it's a really brutal regime.
Well, I would assume for the most part, it's there's the whole world of sports, right? There's adventure racing, there's rowing, I would assume that the mental component to recreate that same body movement habitually over time for that many days, it's as much or more of a mental strength than it is a physical strength. How did you balance that too?
With great difficulty. So because Duncan had obviously done his row before, he had a bit of an insight into this, and he had quite a few difficulties during his row, and but no matter how he worded it or how he put it, he could not have prepared us for how we would feel in those first 5 days, because the sort of lack of sleep and the constant rowing, it's so brutal, and it just you sort of forget how much effort you put in on the oars. It is about mental strength, 100%.
So at no point, if it's done the proper way, at no point is the boat stopped. There's always rowing going on at some point over the course of 39 days.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only time you would stop would be to maybe a pause once a week to couple of guys get in the water and will scrape the bottom of the boat.
Right.
So you get sort of barnacles build up over time, and we're talking marginal gains here. You know, you might get 0.1 of a knot if you get under and scrape, but these all add up, you know, to sort of reduce your time at sea, if you like. And so you've got to think about the calorie intake as well. I think this is where we're starting to get some crossover to the adventure racing side of things. Huge calorie intake, over 6,000 calories a day, which actually isn't enough. You are constantly losing weight, probably more muscle than fat. And the sleeping regime is just as and when you can. You've got other sort of tasks to do on the boat. You know, you're there to maintain the boat as well, but you have to get into this what we call polyphasic sleeping. So you're just getting short sleeps of anywhere up to an hour. You'd be lucky if you sort of get, because once you get off the oars, you've got to clean yourself, look after your hands, you know, the sores you get on your hands, you've got to feed yourself, you've got to get those calories back in, make sure you're hydrated, any boat admin that needs doing, and then you can go to sleep. So that and then you've just got to take on board that's your life now for the next
month and a half. Yep, that's the way it's going to be.
Half, you know,
we made a deal.
Yeah, that's it. So it's and if you haven't done anything like that before, I don't think anybody can tell you what it's going to feel like until you do it. And now I know what it feels like. Duncan needs to get better at how he describes how he describes things.
He told you just enough to get you there.
Yeah, exactly. He said he didn't know how to put it across. But it's probably a good job. It's a bit like my wife, when you have a child, you know how bad it is giving birth and all that sort of thing. And it's pretty brutal, but you end up doing it again.
Right, exactly. You know, over time, you know, we've these built-in forgetters. There's the saying that if we remembered how hard some things were, we'd never do them again.
Yeah.
And so now you're out there now. You push us from the shoreline. You have 12 days of getting ready, and it's rah rah rah. It's karaoke. Yeah. It's a stiff drink. It's all of those things.
Yeah.
And the race starts, and you push away from the shoreline, and you know, any true adventure, if it's a true adventure, success is not guaranteed. Right. Yeah. If you know you're going to succeed, if you know you're going to climb the mountain, then it takes away kind of the point of doing it. Right. So when you started that event and you looked around and you thought about your training and your preparation, looking back on it now, what did you think were your odds of success? Did you think it was a guarantee? Were you 50-50? What was your gut telling you?
I'd say a lot more than 50-50. It's an ocean crossing is never guaranteed. There's so many things that can go wrong, and there's so many things that do go wrong for teams. I think it's a bit of a relief for the race organisers when something goes bad but everybody's safe, because it just highlights actually this isn't a walk in the park. You know, you don't just, because a lot of the guys, like we were, non-rowers before they do this, so it maybe gives people that false sense of, oh well, I don't know how to row, but I'd still like to row an ocean. Right. That there is a lot more to it. You know, you make your own water on board. You can't physically carry enough water, so if the water maker breaks, you've got a sort of backup measure where you have to hand pump. You don't want to be doing that after you've just done 2 hours of rowing. Right. Duncan had to do that on his row, so that's pretty brutal. The auto tillers are designed for yachts, not slow-moving ocean rowing boats, so a lot of them fail. They ended up with foot steering, which when you're trying to row and move your feet to steer on a bearing when there's waves coming everywhere, it's not ideal. So there's so many things that go wrong. And I think we had one team in our year that one of the guys on the team was a pair, just couldn't cope 3 days in, and they wanted off. And I think that's maybe a slight difference between the ocean rowing and adventure racing, is that maybe after a week you can't just get off. You can't just get sort of rescued.
There is no exit ramp.
No,
because the boat is self-contained, right? There's no support vehicles. Like if they come to you, your race is over. You're on your own. If
anybody touches the boat or anybody gets off the boat, the race is over. The fleet is so far spread apart. They could be 1,000 miles apart at any one time. Right. And so they have a safety yacht that sort of goes through the fleet at one point, but then they have to keep going because the winds, and you know they have to keep going to Antigua, and then another boat will leave later on from the Verde Islands, say, and come up and through the fleet. So you could be a week away from rescue. So that boat needs to contain everything you need, food-wise and medical-wise, and anything for any scenario somebody gets poked in the eye. somebody gets hit on the head with an oar or whatever it is, you have to have everything on board to, and again, that sort of similar to adventure racing. I don't know how far you guys go into the self-sustainability of the team before. I'm assuming that if you get outside help, does that affect? Yeah.
So the way the community is interesting. So each team is designed to be a self-sustaining unit, right? So you have to carry enough gear with you to keep yourself sorted. And also there's medical expectations. You have to carry a med kit. You have to carry certain things with you along the way to guarantee your safety. And there's always the opportunity to seek outside assistance. And race directors will do that. They'll provide that. Yeah. And there are teams that get outside assistance that remain in the race. I did an interview the other day of a teammate who was racing in South Africa, and his teammate had a bike crash, and they actually went to the hospital, stitched the person up, and got back into the race. So there is that sense of that. What you really can't do in adventure racing is you're not allowed to get formally structured outside assistance. So you can't say to somebody, meet us at this intersection and give us food. Yeah, you could stop in a store. It's pretty wild. You could stop in a store and buy food. You could stumble across a civilian and ask for food, but you can't prearrange any sort of outside support. It's a very there are these famous stories of and I've seen it myself, that you'll be doing an adventure race in a really remote part of the world, and you'll stumble across like a 24-hour gas station. Yeah. And the racers just descend upon this poor gas and just buy all of the food.
Like moths to a flame. Sort of.
Everything, exactly. And it's coffee and it's this. And we've taken over places where like we've fallen asleep in there. And so you are allowed limited outside assistance. It can't be prearranged. Yeah. And unlike ocean rowing is that while we're a self-contained unit, you're allowed to help each other too, by the way. Like you could give a piece to another. I have a teammate who one time loaned his bicycle to another team. So those things you could do.
Well, that's interesting, because I'm not sure what the whole thing about the crossing is. There's a crossing if you've successfully made it across. If you've had outside assistance and you've still made it across, you've still rowed across an ocean, and it's still pretty epic anyway. And then there's the sort of the ultimate goal for everybody is to be unsupported, unassisted, everything from point A to point B. It's just you and your team. And we had a few moments of temptation, shall we say. It's not very often you come across an ocean rowing boat in the middle of the Atlantic, and we had a yacht called Alejandra, I think, that was under motor because there was no wind a lot of the time for us. And they came over to check us out. This beautiful 50-foot sleek yacht, and they were all.
Wait, you're hallucinating? Like, is that real? Are you guys seeing that too?
And they were all, sort of bikinis and swim shorts on board, having an absolute whale of a time. And it happened to be Will's birthday that day as well. And they were shouting over to us, "Oh, what are you doing out here? And would you like some food?" And initially we were like, "Oh, yeah, that'd be great." And then we were like, "Actually, no, we can't."
Right.
But by that time, a couple of the girls had gone down. They'd come up with bags, and we could see all this fresh fruit pouring out of the bag. And we were just like, "Oh." And we said, "No, sorry, we can't, because we'll get in trouble."
We'll see you at the end. Follow us along.
Yeah. And he was dangling this bottle of wine on a rope, and he was going to sort of like try and lasso it to us. And I thought, well, if he dropped it in the water and we just happened to come across it, that would be fine. But luckily we managed to, I think we called it an integrity check.
Yeah, it was a test by the race organizer.
Yeah, it was. And we passed the test, thankfully. So, but one thing I would say about our team, and one of the sort of biggest mistakes, a couple of mistakes we made, one of them was how Spartan we were with what we had on board in terms of luxuries. And I think we got so focused on the fact that this was a race and every ounce that we put on that boat would count to the weight. We spoke to a team that came second the year before due to, I think the only reason they came second was because their rudder failed or something. They were leading by quite a way. And he said, how much kit can we take individually? And he said, "Oh, well, if you think about a shopping bag," we were like, "Oh, that's a decent size, we'll cut that in half." Right. And that's how much kit we took. Like, oh, wow. So we started stripping the boat of anything that we thought might be vaguely, unuseful. And that included not even having any Tabasco sauce to mix with our rations. And there was no
But it's amazing how hard that gets, right? You see it all the time. You see it like in high mountain expeditions. You see it in adventure racing, where you recognize there's a weight to strength thing, right? Everything you carry takes calories to carry. right? And so you have to find that magic, and I've read stories about teams that do these big adventure races and everybody's carrying their own stove. Well, you don't need 4 stoves. And so it's one of these things where it's that balance of how much do you need. And to your point, your lesson there was the fact that you just didn't Spartan. You could have brought more gear.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we had one box of Lindt chocolates, like Swiss chocolates, and that lasted us, and it became a sort of maybe a once a week treat, and he just couldn't wait for this. And there was one left. We had to play a game on board, like a guessing game, to see who got to eat this last chocolate. And I've never thought about killing somebody over a Swiss chocolate before, but when Duncan won, I think, and I was behind him rowing, I could just see his jaw succulently chewing on.
You're like, I'm going to get you, Duncan.
To strangle him.
I'm going to drown you.
We should have been the amount of calories you need to consume. If we should have just been eating whatever we wanted whenever we wanted. We had beef jerky that we only had one each a day. Duncan's done subsequent rows where he's had a whole pack a day, and he was like, he can't believe the difference on just the morale you get.
So let me ask you about the team, right? So and we started speaking. We talked about the idea that the Royal Commandos drove you the idea of a team, and you look to your right, look to your left. Yeah. Now, no spoiler. It was a successful venture across the ocean.
Yeah.
At what point did the team begin to feel the stress of the event? Like, where did it begin to fray a little bit?
Do you mean into the build up or the actual race?
In the race itself, what was clearly you were successful. I saw the picture. You're all smiling at the end, and so clearly it's okay. But it would be crazy to think that for the course of 39 days it was all sunshine and flowers, right? It was hard along. And why did it get hard? And what did the team do? What did the team do to get through that difficulty?
Yeah. So we had a few occasions. I mean, like you say, you're on this 8 meter by 1.5 meter rowing boat. There isn't a lot of space.
That's your whole world for 39 days.
The ocean strips you to your bare bones emotionally, physically. You're having to row while somebody does their toiletry business directly in front of you into a bucket. You are just exposed completely. So things can get pretty grim. We had a few occasions. One in particular would be the fact that one of our team members, Fraser, got injured enough that he couldn't physically row, and so that changed our whole dynamic. And there was sort of no question that he hadn't done enough training prior, or he didn't deserve to be there, whatever. Far from it. He
was just hurt
just as much, if not more than everybody else. But it was a position that we had to quickly decide what we were going to do, and the best course of action was to take him off the oars so he could rest. He had sort of like compartment syndrome in one of his legs, and he was in a lot of pain, and it was just, it was painful to watch him, let alone what he was going through. So he ended up being off the oars for sort of 5 days or so, which meant our rowing routine changed quite a bit. We ended up rowing 3 hours on, 3 hours off. But then one of those hours you're rowing on your own, which isn't ideal. And that caused quite a bit of friction. Just try to do maths when you're that tired is difficult, trying to work out times and things like that.
And we see that ourselves later in races. We see how teams, that when you factor in the fatigue, or you factor in the physical stress, all of those things come in, that it begins to push upon the team dynamic, and you rely upon the fact that that your teammates came in prepared and were doing the best that they could. But to your point, that was late. How far into the race did that happen?
It was a really bad time as well, because it was so our whole plan was to instead of heading directly west in the sort of the perfect arc, the perfect circle, if you like, we were going to head pretty much direct south, because that's where the trade winds would pick up soonest, and that's where all the currents, everything were going in the right direction. We did that. We did 90 miles in one day. You're getting messages, our fastest boat in the fleet, flying along, and then it stopped. The weather for us after that, the sea was flat the whole race, which is not ideal at all. You're in the tropics as well. It's 30 degrees. A bit of wind helps. And at that point, we haven't managed to negate the distance that the other teams that took a more direct route. So it put us into sort of 7th position or something, which wasn't part of the plan. The Fraser's injury comes into it. The boat starts to slow down. This is where things could easily just fall apart.
Right? All of a sudden you start cannibalizing each other.
Yeah, exactly. And we did really well to get our heads around what we needed to do. Fraser took on other jobs on the boat. Right. He would just constantly feed us, so we didn't have to worry about doing that when we come off the oars. It was quite interesting because we started experimenting with different stroke variations, which we hadn't done before in training because we didn't really have the time. And I think at one point we were sitting at 4.5, 5 knots, which is pretty quick for a boat that weighs nearly a ton. And that helped us. And then when Fraser got back on the oars, we sort of got this new vigor of life again. And then we had teams ahead of us in our sights, so we ended up overtaking the team. And then we chased this South African team right to the end. We sort of took that as we got a lot of people watching us, our friends.
Isn't that wild that once you see another team, and you see it in every sport, the minute you know that they're inside your sight, there's this, nothing changes, but everything changes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we, at one point, we sort of rowing, and we could see this light on the horizon behind us, and it was sort of flashing for a little bit, and then it would go. Now, that's a bit strange. It can't see a boat on the radar or anything like that. And it happened again half an hour later. It was like, it looked exact, and we're like, that's another team. And they're doing their changeover at night every hour, and which became on the half hour. And as soon as we realized that they were that close, you to see another ocean row, what we should have done was got on the radio, said hello, and tied alongside and had a bit of a chat and but we were just so focused on, we can't let them catch us. We're good. And for the next 3 days, it was like pepper potting. They were catching us. We were drifting away. They were catching us. But
wow, mentally that's really hard. So for 3 days back and forth,
and we were getting updates every 4 hours of exactly all positions, people's speeds. So even just to gain 1 knot on them, and then we were just so obsessed with getting away from them, we'd forgotten about the team ahead of us. And then when we realized that we'd come within 30 miles of the team ahead of us and we still had like a week to go, then it was like, right, it's game on. And the South African team, mad for waves, we chased them for a whole week, and we got to within 60 miles of them. Unfortunately, we didn't catch them, but we wish we could have raised them on the radio, because we would have just had banter with them, because they were just another team out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean going through exactly the same thing we were going through. Right. And we had nothing but love and, for them, and well wishes. And if anything, once you got to the finish line, they were the first people I was personally looking forward to seeing, because I didn't have any family at the finish line. But you do get this sense of community out in the middle of the Atlantic, and you do sort of, I wonder how they're getting on. I wonder how that team's getting on, because you form these very quick bonds at the start line in La Gomera.
Very common adventure race dynamic too. And to the point too, and I'm gonna make an assumption here. If they were in some sort of distress, you would abandon your race to care for them.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
No brainer.
Yeah. It wouldn't have even entered our minds, In fact, I remember, because Fraser was off the oars, there was a female team behind us, and they were being. So you have people back home giving you updates. And Angus Collins, who's an adventure ocean rower in his own right, he was giving us updates on, you need to come up a couple of degrees, or you need to row a bit harder, or whatever it is. He'd sent a message to them, but it came to us, and it said, "Good effort, you going half a knot faster than the Row for Victory team." And he didn't mean to send it to us.
Right.
So we got this message like, "Oh, thanks, Angus." Yeah. So coming to that sort of stage at the race now, where you sort of get the feeling that, we're going to achieve this. We're getting close now.
Yeah, eventually you can sniff the finish line, right? We always talk about in adventure racing too. There's a point in the race where you're now racing for home, right? Yeah. You go out on the course, and then you come in from the course, and when you know that you're now being pulled back towards the finish, there's energy that goes with that.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of broke it down into the first 500 miles, the first 1,000 miles, the halfway point. And a lot of these things tied in for us. New Year Eve was pretty much the halfway point. So we had a little celebration at night. We let off a white flare, to mark the new year coming in. And that was a great thing for us. And then coming down to that last 500 miles, that's really good. And then obviously the next big thing is the sight of land.
Right. Then it's just energy has to flow right through you.
Oh yeah, that's a really bizarre feeling, because it's the thing with rowing is you're facing the wrong direction. You don't face the way you're rowing. You face to the rear of the boat. So you sort of wanting to stop rowing just to see if you can see land a bit closer and stuff. And then very bizarrely, within a few miles, you're saying you can smell the finish line. Literally, you can smell the earth. Right. Of land, you can in the wind. Obviously, your surroundings start to change quite a bit before that. You're seeing seabirds that you wouldn't normally see because they're land based and things like that. So yeah, it just excitingly builds up to this finish line, which is amazing. So
clearly very successful. What was your final standing?
So we finished 4th in the fours teams and 5th overall, which I think
that's huge.
First team. Oh, it's amazing. The first team finished in 35 days. We finished 39 days. So if you span that over 3,000 miles, and then the South African team who finished sort of 16 hours before us, that for me, I always think of it as equivalent as they dipped their chest at the finish line, and that's how close we were. Yeah. They finished on the same day as us. We came in on the evening, and that was one of the best feelings I've ever had.
Did you have a tough time when you get how withered was your lower body when you were done? How were your legs and your thighs and your calves?
So throughout the whole experience, your body's deteriorating as you'll know. You're getting sores. You sat down a lot of the time, so you're getting sores on your backside, which you have to care. The grippy hold of the oars, you're getting horrendous calluses on your hands, which you've got to constantly maintain, and that you grip because you're 12 hours a day, you're holding on to these oars, so your hands start to lock, and you wake up for your shift and you can't physically open your fingers to put your socks on and stuff like that. So your body's in pretty bad condition by the time you get there, let alone if you're a solo rower that takes 100 days.
I can't imagine the solo must just be incredible.
Yeah. So and then once you get to the finish line and you're getting off the boat, you've got your sea legs on, and this is something else that Duncan didn't just describe very well, but it's like being drunk but without the fun part of it. I physically had to hold on to the floor because I thought I was going to fall over once I got off the boat.
Well, your inner ear, your balance is all off. You've had to get used to that, and all of a sudden, the land is no longer moving underneath you, and your body's not used to that.
Yeah, and the families who are there to meet you, families and friends, they do get a brief sort of before you turn up to say, look, these guys are going to look horrendous. Yeah. They're going to be unshaven. They're going to smell. They're going to look like they've been dragged through a bush. And
the picture at the finish was pretty wild looking. The way the four of you guys you look like you were discovered after being in the mountains for like a year.
Yeah, we look like we've been lost at sea, basically, literally, and that's what it felt like. But they also say that look, when you get them, when you hug them, don't just let go of them, because if you do, they'll just fall straight backwards because they're not used to that. And one thing for me, my calf muscles completely disappeared. You never stand up on an ocean rowing boat because it's unsafe. You sort of crouch down when you're doing your changeovers and things. So you either sat down rowing or you're lying down sleeping. So all of a sudden you sort of stood up, and then to walk, it feels like you don't have any calf muscles. And one other very, very bizarre thing was because we've going at such a slow speed for so long, when we got a lift from the finish line to the hotel, we were only doing 30 miles an hour, but it felt like we were flying. Yeah. It was so strange. And then coming back to the UK, huge lorries flying past you. It was frightening. It was very, very.
I would assume too, like feeling like a sense of claustrophobia because for so long your horizon is so large for so long.
Yeah.
Right. Then all of a sudden you're back and there's buildings around you and there's cars around you and things like that. So, so what was your readjustment like? You know, in adventure racing, in many sports, we talk about the post-expedition like depression. The fact that you did this massive thing, it was amazing, and then all of a sudden you're back to being a schnook, right? You're back to like, you know, it's here I climbed a virtual Mount Everest, if you will, and now I'm the guy shopping for my groceries. Like,
it's again. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. I've just rowed across an ocean, and now I've got to go to work and have a look at these valves in the test bay.
I have to fill this TPS report out, like those kinds of things. It's like, okay, like glad I'm here. 3 weeks ago, I was a rowing god on the ocean, and now I'm doing no work.
Well, there's something similar that I've put to in the military sense of things. When I remember I came off the front line, one night I was sleeping in a dusty shell scrape or foxhole, and then literally 24 hours later, my wife and I are in the Hilton Hotel, sat in a jacuzzi on R&R, and then 24 hours prior I was making life and death decisions. Now I'm in a shop, and a woman's holding up a black dress or a red dress, and she just can't make the decision which one she wants. It just feels so trivial and benign, and you just so it's similar to that. You come back off an epic adventure like that and you can't believe it's over, and it was tough when you were doing it, but you wish you were there again.
Exactly. Sure. It's wild, right? It's that whole dynamic. And then the other part of it too is when you do these big, huge things, and you find yourself having conversations about it with people who don't do those things, and they just can't wrap their heads around it. And it's like it's trying to describe something that you have to have it. And so I'm assuming that you and the other rowers, that there's a bond there that exists between you that is akin to, not the same as, but akin to like being in combat together. I don't want to compare the two directly, but
it's I mean, ocean rowing, especially because you are literally relying on those people for your life. You could end up in a scenario where you do rely on those people for your own life. And there's a bit of a funny, sad scene of me and Will. We ended up going back because our families couldn't come out to see us just because of the cost to get them to Antigua and
it's wife and kids and travel and stuff. We
were keen just to get straight back home, and so we'd been together and we were rowing partners we shared the same cabin for a month and a half. So we were just like brothers, basically, like twins. And we got on the plane together. We were sat next to each other on the plane, and then we get to London, and my father-in-law was there to pick me up, and he was waiting for his wife, and I had to walk away from him to go to the car. And it was just like, but bye, It was just like,
you've been attached together. You shared this amazing thing.
In his face, he looked so sad. It was just like you were like leaving your child at the airport sort of thing. It was really bizarre.
Yeah, it's a wild social experiment experience that we've had there. So you go through, you do this amazing experience. You've worked hard for it. You did so well. Great result. Looking back on it now, what were the lessons that you took out of it that you learned in the middle of it all? Like, what would you say to somebody now, like when you're taking on a big adventure, ocean rowing, adventure racing, whatever it might be? What was the thing that you did right that carried you through it?
So one thing I remember taking away was that at the time I was 37 when I did it. And so it had been like 10 years since I'd left the Marines. And I sort of felt at that point in my life that actually maybe it's all over for me now, adventure-wise. And do I still have that mental strength and capacity to do something like this? And as I got into it and into the race, I was like, hell yeah, of course I do, and why did I even doubt myself? And what's next sort of thing, obviously after the race, I was thinking what's next, but it sort of did reassure me. And then I think what you find a lot with ocean rowers, probably I would assume it's the same with adventure races. They're all actually 40, 50, 60 years old. The endurance stays, and I think it becomes less about the endurance and more about the stubbornness, sort of give in. And we met a guy who swam around Great Britain, Ross Edgley, and he wrote this little message inside the cabin, and it said, "Be so naive that you start, yet so stubborn that you finish." And that just became our whole mantra. Just we didn't know anything about rowing, didn't know anything about ocean rowing. Okay, but we want to achieve this epic undertaking. What do we need to do? We worked out the steps, and we were naive enough to throw ourselves at it. But mid-Atlantic, we were stubborn enough to get through it and get it completed. And anybody who's thinking about doing something like that, just stop thinking and get on with it. Go and do it. I think that was another thing that talk to people and they can't believe it, and they're sort of, I couldn't do something like that. And you just want to grab them and say, you actually can, you've just got to commit to it. It's all out there,
Well, there you have it, folks. Episode 105 of The Dark Zone. Thanks to Glyn for coming on to the show. Great story. Kudos to him and his team and his training and all that he could teach us about ocean rowing and preparation and adventure racing. We hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Dark Zone. If you like what you hear, please head over to your platform of choice and like and click and subscribe. The algorithm likes that. Keep training. Go out there, be safe, and remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking.